Well, hello guys, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again. It's Brian, and we're going to do a quick little demonstration on how we like to punch out our gauge faces. This is a little technique I came up with many years ago when I was getting back into building model cars, and I recognized that model car kits were actually putting in decals for the gauge faces, and I thought that was amazing. But I was also noticing that the carrier film could be printed a little bit off center, or the carrier film was a little too large, something like that, to fit down inside the gauge, inside the gauge face hole. So I went on a hunt for something that would be the most appropriate type of thing for that, and I ended up with what I thought was the bee's knees, and that was a micro punch set made by sold by Micromark. And I'll have a link down below in the description for the actual item. But yeah, it is pricey. We're talking very expensive for a tool for your bench. However, here was how I justified it. I'm only buying this the one time, and I'll never have to buy it again. So it's a one-time cost. If you take really good care of it, you'll never have to replace it ever again. And then I keep everything for this in this nice little pill jar. This piece also fits in there. I keep it all in this handy dandy pill jar on my desk. I always know where it's at. I always know that all the pins are there, so I don't ever have to worry about those rolling off or getting stuck or becoming an axle by accident to something else. But yeah, the thing is that it is expensive, but I think it's worth the cost when it comes to the frustration level that it helps decrease. So money over time, I guess, is the best way to describe that if you want to talk about it mathematically. But this little piece here it's a two-piece system, and it's got a little piece of acrylic on top, which is nice. It's transparent so that you can, like, if you have a bunch of gauge decals like I had here, I just got the one left. But if you have a bunch of gauges and you want a particular one and you shift it in there, and this was opaque, you wouldn't know if you had the right one in there. You'd be pretty much guessing if it was the right one that was in there. So the transparent top is nice, but it does lend to a little bit of an issue that we'll get here in a second. There is a corresponding pin to every one of the holes, so that's really nice. And I have discovered that the pins themselves are, oops, out of focus, are a little bit on the brittle side. You can chip off edges and stuff like that. So when I first started using this, I was using a household hammer, and I was knocking off little chips here and there. So on a couple of pins, I have little X's drawn on there. This is not one of them, of course, but I do have little X's drawn on there for which side is the bad side. That's the side we want to hit. Later on, I decided to go to Harbor Freight and pick out a nice little thwacker hammer. It's got a pretty good long handle to it. And this one has a brass top and then also a Delrin top, and the weight is in the actual head of the hammer, so it's actually got some good heft to it. So I use the Delrin side on the dowel pins because I don't want to be chipping off any more of it. I had tried using the brass, which was nice, but the Delrin seems like it really helps protect the dowel pins there, so that we don't ever have to buy it again. So that's what I talk about when I mean being conscientious and taking good care of it. So we got our dash here out of the parts box, and some goober's already glued on the steering wheel, so we're going to have to work around that. But the way I figure out which side's gauge pin we're going to need, or dowel pin we're going to need, is just pull out a couple out of the jar and then do some test fits like that, and that seems like that's going to be the guy right there. So what size is that? I'm not exactly certain. There are no sizes etched on any of this stuff. But I mean, it's a, oh, you'd think I'd practice this off camera once or twice, but that's the hole we're going to use there. All right, so let's get our little piece of card with our gauge on it and slip that in between. So here's what I was talking about earlier, how this can lend to a little bit of an issue, and that is because it is transparent. It does lend itself to a little bit of parallax, I believe is what it's called. So if we're looking at it from a particular angle, it could look like it's centered, but if we're not square on, it will appear it will appear centered when it's not, and that's bit me a couple times in the past. So I'm gonna see if I can get in there nice and close. We can see that that's very, very closely centered. So the cheat that I use is I'll use a little light. I'm not going to point the camera at a light because that's just mean. So let's just do a little bit of a shift, see how that looks. And we'll just check it one last time. Still not quite centered, so we need to shift it down just a little bit more. And the acrylic piece here does fit so nicely onto the stainless steel back that if just the lightest finger pressure will keep stuff pinched in place pretty well. So let's just take it. This is the tedious part of the operation, and probably should have used the power of pause for that. So there we go. How's that looking? I'm gonna call that good. I'll call that good. So get that out of the way. Set that down without letting them separate. Our little pin guy goes right in there. Here's our thwacker. Now this is something I want to warn you about. If you have a glass top workstation, or if you're working on a piece of tile or something like that, you will break it by doing this process. So you'll want to do it on something other than a piece of tile or glass. I have a piece of flooring sample from one of the major hardware stores. So this is actually what we're thinking about putting in the house. And somehow the sample sort of ended up on my workstation, and I use this to cut my photo etch and stuff on. So it's vinyl, but it's got no give to it at all, and it works really, really well and absorbs knife cuts really nicely. So I'm like, yeah, if we were to get that flooring in the house, I wouldn't need this on my desk. I could just do all of my work on the floor where it's nice and cool. So we're going to use the Delrin side, and then we're going to there 2 smacks. That's all it took. I could see the pin drop, and we could also hear the tone change, so we know we were good. So let's just leave the pin where it's at and take that up. There's a little bit right there. Shift it through, and then we'll use a little bit of lick on our finger, and then let's take a look and see how we did. There we go. That's how we do it. All right, that's the whole secret, guys. The whole secret right there. That looks really, really good. Okay, boys and girls, thanks for tuning in yet again for this little, not really a tutorial, but sort of a how-to. And we'll talk to you a little bit later on. Bye now.